African National Congress says its inability to address corruption within its ranks may be tied to its leadership structures being held hostage by corruption elements. Over the weekend, the party concluded its National Executive Committee. Let's now look at what came out of the ANC NEC and bring in a public governance researcher from the Africa Policy Conversations, Hlumelo Xaba. Hlumelo, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning to you, Alden, and to the viewers at home, and thank you for having me this morning.
I want to start off with the City Press report around ANC leaders being, quote, held hostage by corruption elements. And I was looking at this diagnostic report, which for me almost seems a bit similar to the 2016 report by the then Secretary General of the ANC, Gwede Mantashe. But at the time, of course, the main key role players there were the Gupta brothers, former President Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma is still the president of the party. Fast forward 8 years later, the ANC is still facing the same problem, even though those key actors, the Gupta brothers, as well as Jacob Zuma, are no longer there. What is the party dealing with here?
Well, I think firstly, we need to actually take note of the fact that the ANC has an inability of dealing with its own internal problems insofar as corruption is concerned, because like you did mention now, that the diagnostic report that is currently available now and that is currently being perused is the one that was also being checked 8 years back, which shows that there has not been any intentional steps or measures rather that have been taken insofar as dealing with corruption is concerned. What we've seen, however, over the past couple of years is that the ANC tends to be very selective in who it actually pursues insofar as people that are corrupt. For instance, we saw with people like Ace Magashule, and I think we all know that that's just a political or factional battle rather between him and the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think the ANC is not as intentional, and it has a very huge inability of dealing with corruption insofar as its leaders and members in general are concerned. I think it takes a very selective approach insofar as dealing with corruption is concerned within their organization. And like you did mention that former President Jacob Zuma is not part of the organization anymore. So how then do they actually deal with such matters of members that aren't part of the organization anymore?
Yeah, and even on this issue around the branches of the ANC and how the branches of the ANC has been weakened, which the president of the ANC spoke about yesterday, even during his lecture on the life and legacy of O.R. Tambo. Again, we go back to the 2016 diagnostic report of the ANC. This is what it says: decline in the quality of branches and membership. The general decline in the quality of membership is a product of the following factors: mass recruitment of members is not a problem in itself. Adversely, the quality of the time, the weak induction program, and then also comrades get introduced to prospective groupings and factions before they understand the politics of the movement. Which for me, once again, is, so once the ANC has identified problems, and this is the issue that has been raised before, it is the ANC is good at identifying these problems, but is it able to solve these problems? But is there also conversation to be had about how institutionalized corruption can actually be?
Well, in the ANC, I actually had a conversation with a colleague a couple of days ago, and we spoke about how chronic corruption has become in the ANC over the past decades, or even more than that, actually, because corruption in the ANC, I think, dates back from the arms deal of former President Jacob Zuma, which is still going to court for, by the way. So there's this chronic institutionalized system that they have insofar as corruption is concerned within the organization. And hence I said that the ANC is also a very polarized, highly polarized organization where factions are now the order of the day. Hence, I was actually bringing up the point that the manner and how they actually persecute those who are found in the wrong side of the law, or maybe those who are alleged of wrongdoing, is very selective. Because, for instance, I listened to President Cyril Ramaphosa's closing remarks yesterday, where he was actually speaking about the expedition of a panel that is going to be instituted within the Secretary General's office, where they're going to give those who are alleged of wrongdoing within the Zondo report a chance to actually appeal, or for them to actually review the charges, or rather the cases that they have to answer for within that report. I mean, the Zondo Commission report has been out now for about, I think it's close to 3 years, but no action has been taken against people that are actually alleged of corruption and state capture within that report. You know that President Jacob Zuma was at the center of all of that maladministration that was happening, but there are actually high officials within the ANC, such as Gwede Mandashe and people like Melusi Gigaba, who are currently in the NEC now, David Mahlobo and the likes, that have not actually answered for any of the alleged corruption that they have that they have been labeled for within the state capture report. So it just goes to show that corruption has become really institutionalized, and I think they just use a very, like I did mention, selective approach insofar as persecuting people that have been alleged of wrongdoing within their organization. So it now becomes a very difficult task insofar as holding those people accountable and ensuring that there's actually intentional renewal program, because for them, the renewal program, if they don't really go after the people or persecute those who have been alleged of corruption and state capture within their organization, then the renewal program that they are actually intending on embarking on would really be a myth, to be honest.
Yeah, and we know the ANC is always renewing and uniting and trying to deal with factions. But I think it goes back to the point that is raised in that report about the party being held hostage by corruption elements. You mentioned Gwede Mandashe. He's also the chairperson of the ANC. There's Nomvula Mokonyane, who's also implicated. She is the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC. So you have all of these people right at the top, at the helm of the ANC, and how the ANC is perceived to be failing to respond to this. I wonder what this means for the rank and file of the party, and considering what the diagnostic report is saying around this, what this means for the opposition, especially the opposition that is within the government of national unity.
Well, if you take a closer look at the current political setup insofar as how the government of national unity and the opposition is set up at the present moment, there's currently a void insofar as opposition politics are concerned. Yes, we have the EFF there, which have been very vocal in terms of calling the ANC out for its corruption. Remember the Pay Back the Money and Zuma Must Fall campaign, which was actually led by the EFF. We know that there were the DA at some point are the ones that were at the forefront of reinstating the charges on the arms deal on President Jacob Zuma. So now the predicament that we actually see is that there is some sort of a void, rather, in terms of opposition politics, because majority of the political parties that were opposition in previous administrations are now part of the government of national unity. Now, it's going to make it very difficult for a party like the DA, for instance, to actually hold the ANC accountable if they are actually in the same partnership with them in terms of coalitions, because we know that political parties or other politicians always tend to actually look after their interest than actually doing the right thing, such as now exercising oversight and ensuring that there is sufficient and optimal scrutiny on the ruling party. Well, the ANC, in as much as they did lose power, are currently still a leading figure within the current government setup. So it's now going to be a little bit difficult and tricky for parties like the DA, for instance, as well as the IFP, which are also like leading role players or major role players within the government of national unity, to hold the ANC accountable. Hence, I was saying that there is now a void insofar as the opposition politics are concerned. But I do hope that hopefully with the parties that are left there, which are now made up of mostly the Progressive Caucus, that are the MK Party, the EFF, Africa Transformation Movement, and all the other smaller parties, will actually ensure that there is sufficient oversight and scrutiny insofar as holding the ANC accountable. Because currently, if you look at the current GNU, for instance, they are actually the ones who have been alleged, whose leaders have been alleged of wrongdoing and corruption more than the other parties that are part of that partnership.
Yeah, and then finally, on the government of national unity, I was at the Hlumelo Xaba Foundation's forum that was taking place in Drakensberg, and Mcebisi Jonas, our former deputy minister of finance, was speaking on the government of national unity and the head of the ANC's 2027 conference, and is saying that he sees the government of national unity also being used as a proxy ahead of that particular conference. What do you read into that, considering now that you have the deputy president who's already now said that he is available if the members call on him to stand for the president of the ANC position, and then on the other end you have the secretary general and the president of the party saying that it's not time to have a succession debate as yet?
I listened to the president's, one of the things that he actually alluded on his closing remarks yesterday was that they did touch on succession plans within the organization leading up to the 2027 conference. But then he also alluded to the fact that they are not really, that's not really a discussion that they are ready to have yet, because 2027 is not really close by. But then in the ANC, you know that it's a very highly contested terrain insofar as national leadership is concerned. So 2027, for that matter, is not very far. So I think we are beginning to see some people, we are going to begin to see certain figures within the organization who are going to raise their hand up in terms of succeeding President Ramaphosa, or maybe taking over the top 7 leadership roles. I think, for instance, you can see, I think we've actually noticed the fact that people like Banyaza Lesufi have been very critical of how the government of national unity is constituted and everything like that. So I think the bone of contention in terms of leading up to the 2027 conference is going to be how members of the ANC up to a branch level have actually characterized this GNU. And I think that's going to be one of the determining factors in terms of who is going to be chosen as the next leader of the ANC, be it the president, deputy president, and all the other positions that are up for takes within the top 7. So I think the GNU is really, really going to be one of the bone of contention within the organization, not only actually leading up to the 2027 conference, but also in terms of how the party is going to fare in the 2026 local government elections, because we know that we are less than 24 months away from that, which is also something that I think the party will need to reflect on to see how people in society as well as members internally within the organization are going to characterize the organization in terms of ensuring that they do get the number of votes that they actually envisage in the 2026 elections.
Yeah, and of course, after the 2027 ANC's elective conference, that will mean there will still be 2 years left of the 7th administration. Will that 7th administration continue with the government of national unity, depending on who comes out victorious at the ANC's 2027 elections, the 2027 conference, rather? Thank you so much for your time, Hlumelo Xaba, the Africa Policy from the Africa Policy Conversation on the outcomes of the ANC's NEC.